Hello everyone. It's been a minute since we've done one of these lives, but I'm excited to have this discussion with Dr. Claudia on overwhelm. What's up, guys? Hello. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Claudia and I are going to be having a discussion on feeling overwhelmed and how during this time we can still thrive or survive or just deal. We're going to be talking about all the things. All right, we're going to bring Dr. Claudia in. Welcome, my friends. No OnlyFans. I do not have an OnlyFans. Hi.
What a way to enter.
Yeah. That's what people want to know. So
we'll go ahead and address that then.
Yeah. No OnlyFans. No OnlyFans. We're doing things a little more wholesome out here.
How's everyone feeling tonight? We usually come on Monday, so it's a little different of a vibe. It's Thursday. It's the day before Friday and the start of the weekend, so it's probably a little bit different, right? I feel like usually when we come on Mondays, we're like ready to like start our week and kind of get our mind right. But now we're in this place where we're starting to like unwind, so it's a little bit different of a vibe, right?
Totally different vibe. I feel like Monday has a lot of like motivation energy, right? Like momentumous energy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is different. But I don't know. We had that chat the other night about feeling overwhelmed, and I just figured it was something that the community would benefit from. So here we are.
Absolutely. And I think that that's something I'm seeing a lot with my clients. I'm seeing a lot with my friends, my family, and it's important. We come on these pages to talk about real life things, and so that you coming to me and saying like, let's talk about feeling overwhelmed. I'm like,
perfect.
It just makes sense. It just makes sense right now.
Perfect. So we just want to open up the floor to you guys, those of you who are tuning in, and just hear how overwhelm presents for you. What does it look like? How does it feel? For me, overwhelm feels like tired yet frantic at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't get a hold of my thoughts no matter what I do. But usually you don't want to do the things that you need to do. You know what I mean? You don't want to like sit on the cushion. You don't want to go for a walk. You just like feel paralyzed. You feel stuck.
Yes. Yeah. So for you, that feeling of just like being like overexhausted and knowing what you've got to do to get recharged, but feeling overwhelmed is not even be able to like do the things.
Yeah, it feels like see, look, Angie just said feels like I'm drowning, shut down. Like it's like that. Where like you're in this mind frame of everything that you like, your system's like, go for a walk, and then your mind, like the overwhelm is like, no, just check out. Like just put on a show and just check out. Like, you know what I mean? This is Shonda just said I can't take time to take care of myself because I have too much going on. It's like that narrative.
Absolutely.
Of like everything else is more important than my self-care. That's overwhelm right there.
Yep. But it's interesting because even just in knowing that you're overwhelmed is half the battle, because a lot of people just run on fumes, right? Or even like just have that overwhelmed feeling and don't even know that they're experiencing that. Right? So I think even just acknowledging that you're feeling overwhelmed, and right, so you said something, Nicole. You said about checking out, that you just want to check out.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's okay.
Yes. You know what's so crazy? I had this moment yesterday where like you'd be really proud because I drew a boundary on myself where I would have normally pushed myself.
Yeah.
I had 3 workout videos to film and I did all 3, but the third one, the video wasn't recording, like my phone hit storage. So I didn't like, and then I literally was just like, I was so overwhelmed. I was like lightheaded every time I sit up and I was like, Nicole, why can't you do this? And I'm like talking to my body. I'm like, I don't want to fight with you. Like, please, let's just get through this. And then my body said, can you do this tomorrow? And I was like, yes. And I literally put on like girly clothes. I got out of my masculine into my feminine and I went for a walk. And it was like this moment of, oh, that overwhelm was happening because I was trying to force my system to do more.
Absolutely. And then it's only going to create more and more feeling of being overwhelmed, right? So when we say check out, when we say like, that we just like can't do the tasks, that can't do, our priorities, and we're not able to do, whether it be, school work, job work, things around the house, whatever it may be, because you're overwhelmed, sometimes it's okay to check out.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's okay to look at yourself and ask yourself that question. Can I give myself permission to do this another time when I have the bandwidth for it, the energy for it? Can I push pause? Can I just check out? Can I get, into mindless TV right now and just let my system come down? Because sometimes it is just that, right? Listening to music or getting out of the place of thinking of all the things that you need to do. If you just take a break of thinking of all the things that you need to do, that can be what you need right there to even start to bring relief to that feeling.
Absolutely. That's actually when we were prepping, we didn't write that. Like we were doing like all the positive things you can do, but sometimes it is that, right? Sometimes it is checking out and not, it's crazy. I was talking to my sister the other day, and for those of you guys who don't know, Noelle broke 3 of her toes,
Yes.
like 3 or 4 months ago. And I was like, Noelle, I got to give it to you. Like, you really have been keeping it together. You haven't been able to walk. You haven't been able to work out. Like, how are you doing it? You're producing with work. It's like, honestly, I'm watching a lot of shows. And just like having that like outlet of kind of like, doing what she needs to do in her life, but then recognizing that where she is with circumstances in her life right now,
Right.
checking out, or not checking, like, can we use a better word? Is that
what makes you feel like checking out's a bad word?
just because it's like, I guess because like I deal sometimes with escapism, like wanting to get out of my reality, and like it may have like a bit of a negative connotation, but maybe this is part of like developing a healthier relationship with it, and saying that it is okay to check out.
Exactly. Because checking out doesn't mean that you can't check back in. Right? Like, and I saw that somebody asked, what if when you check out you have trouble checking back in?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what you have to do when you give yourself permission to check out. It's not saying that you're closing the door and locking it, right? It's saying that we're going to pick this back up tomorrow,
right,
or whatever the next available day is, that we're going to come back to this. And it's living up to your promise. It's living up to your word, because your word is your word. When you give word to somebody else, you make sure you honor it, because that's important for you. And so it needs to be just as important to yourself. So when you say, I'm going to check out tonight, I'm going to close my laptop, I'm going to turn my phone on airplane mode, I'm going to take some time for myself, I'm also letting myself have the permission that when I'm able to tomorrow, I'm going to open back the laptop. I'm going to turn my phone back to its mode where I can be productive. Mm-hmm. So it's you have to form that trusting relationship with yourself, just like you would anybody else when you give that word of, hey, I'm going to be right back, that you're really going to be right back.
Right. Myra just said, it depends on how you look at it. It just means right now I need to put my energy elsewhere. And I like that reframe, because that's like that's on the same vein of downtime is productive too. Right. And when you were talking, I was thinking about where this came from. Not that I wasn't listening to you, but like it just prompted this question of like, where did this culture around always being on and not checking out, where did it really come from? And I think that, when you follow a lot of motivating, inspiring, very productive, successful people who are very conscientious, they're very hardworking people, you feel like, especially like the Gary V's of the world, right? That are like always fucking on, or the Tony Robbins of the world, and then it kind of like makes you feel like you've always got to be on too, to be, I guess, yeah, you know.
Well, I think what's really important is that nobody shows their entire world.
That's facts.
Nobody. I don't care how big you are on social media. Like, I don't care if you live on it. If you even like look at that social media person and they're like, wow, they're always posting, they're always on. People don't know half the shit that you do. And you're extremely transparent with your audience, right? You're extremely transparent with the people that follow you, but they still don't know everything. And so the Gary V's, all of them, we can't say that they don't check out.
Gary Vee doesn't check out, but that's okay, because like I don't feel like I need to be at that level. Like it's an old narrative. It's totally.
But again, I think it's really important to even define what does checking out mean.
Myra goes, Gary Vee sleeps.
Gary Vee sleeps. Right.
But he has someone creating content for him right there, right?
Right. But does even like could even like sleep be checking out?
True.
Like to a certain degree, right? Like I'm gonna call it a night. Is that also checking out?
Yeah. But I also think like it just makes me rethink my relationship with social media, because a lot of what I show is me on, and it makes me also like want to just show more of a balance, you know, because I think that it will help other people not feel like they need to be on all the time as well.
Exactly. And I think that's what helps with that overwhelmed feeling, right? Even for me, it's when, you know, I don't post as much as I would ideally like on my page, but I know that if I did, that could have me feeling overwhelmed, because right now I have a lot of tasks. Right now there's a lot of things for me to be doing in the business. So if I'm pushing myself to be on social media maybe more than I actually have the bandwidth for, then I could get overwhelmed. Right. So even looking at, if I add one more thing, will it be able to be digestible for me, or is it going to push me over?
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. So we have a little list here of what overwhelm signifies. Like, what does it mean when it shows up in your life? Okay. And the first one is we've reached our emotional bandwidth, right? So there's just so many things pulling on our emotional needs or our reservoir that we're at this place where our system is telling us, take a beat, go recharge, go pour into yourself.
Yes. Yeah. To be able to say, okay, I've gotten up to this point. How can I take some things off of my, like, even my own, like, I want to say to-do list, but the internal to-do list of all the things, right? Like, how can I either take some things off, lighten my load, to be able to function? Because if we're stacked, then we're literally going to feel that physical weight. It's going to physiologically come about that we're just, that's that stuck feeling. Is that, you know, we have too many tasks, too much is going on. So being able to say, where is my bandwidth today? Because that even matters, right? We don't have the same energy every single day. Sure. And so even editing your internal to-do list to match where you are and to honor where you are. Some days it's low energy, some days it's high energy. You know, you and I talked about today was a high energy day for us. So we probably did 1,000 things, but it may not be that tomorrow. All things, right? But it may not be that tomorrow, and we have to be gentle with ourselves to know that we need to have that maneuverability so that we don't get overwhelmed and say, gosh, if I did, you know, all these things yesterday, like, why can't I tomorrow? Right. You know, why can't I today?
Right. I think just like what you just said, like today was a high energy day, tomorrow it might not be. Well, yesterday wasn't for me. Exactly. Yesterday was extremely low energy day for me. And I think that the only reason I was able to have the bandwidth that I did today was specifically because at 3:00, when I was trying to force myself to do something, I literally just said, you know what? I'm going to pick this back up tomorrow, and I'm going to take the rest of the day to just be. And I think that allowed me that, you know, versus forcing myself to get the video done and then having another low energy day today, right? Because like that just, it sort of carries over. And it comes down to like, you know, I'm seeing a lot of people saying, I feel guilty. I feel like I'm fighting myself right now, watching this versus getting back to all the things I need to do. I think it comes down to, it really comes down to the relationship that you have with yourself, you know, and how flexible you are with yourself. And do you want to have a collaborative relationship with your energy? Do you want to have a collaborative relationship with your mental health, with your physical health? Or do you want to have more of like this tyrant energy where you're constantly forcing yourself to do things? You know, I think that sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we've made commitments and we have responsibilities that we just need to fucking do.
Yep.
But I think a lot of the time we lack boundaries with ourselves and others. So we're adding on all of these things. We're adding all of the things to our to-dos, and then we feel overwhelmed. And then we berate ourselves after piling all this shit on ourselves. Then we berate ourselves for not living up to this ideal standard that we have for ourselves that isn't fucking realistic.
Yes. Absolutely. You know what the shit that really like gets me is when we get mad at ourselves for not doing self-care.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Your face is like
What? Like, let's think about that, because I've done it plenty of times, right? Where it's been like, oh my gosh, like I set up in my mind that I really want to like do like a hair mask or like, you know, whatever it may be, like at the end of my work day. But I was so tired that I just needed to like pass out. And then the next morning, I'm like, gosh, I didn't get that hair mask in. How counterproductive is that, right?
It's so counterproductive. Well, because but the problem is it's the way that it's why we always say self-love isn't always bubble baths and manicures and massages, because for you that hair mask is self-care, but going to bed early is also self-care. Like, so you know, it's like these expectations, these Instagrammable expectations that we put on ourselves for what is what, instead of just saying, you know what, I'm literally just gonna check out, right?
Yeah, just needed to check out. Taking my ass to bed was self-care for me, right? Like going to sleep, getting rest, recharging, like that was self-care. So if we get mad at ourselves for not doing tasks, well, how productive really is that? Now we're just wasting time with that internal battle instead of just moving forward, right? Moving forward, releasing, you know, that we didn't get that thing done at that time. Instead of wasting time battling at, just move forward, right? Move forward and be able to release and say, all right, didn't make that mark. What's the new deadline?
And also just like, I think also realizing what, like, you know, since we were talking about self-care, changing, like you change what you widen the box on, or you add more self-care tools. So like, okay, well for me, dressing in whites and pinks and flowy outfits is like self-care to me, because it allows my feminine to express. Yes. And I never really like made that connection until this week, when like I just allowed myself to organically get dressed in the space that I was in, and then I like looked at myself in the mirror, I'm like, huh, oh my gosh, like this makes me feel good. This is self-care, right? And so like, yeah, I think also just like widening the scope and realizing that lots of things can be self-care that don't even like aren't stereotypical self-care. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It just like you said it, and I think even Nicole on here said it too, is that, you know, it's not always Instagrammable, right? Like it's not always like a pretty picture what self-care is. We may not even be able to post it, and like that's okay. Like we can just do it, and we can just enjoy whatever moment it is, whether it's just sitting on the couch being self-care, watching, you know, just the binging being self-care. We don't have to demonize those things. We don't have to demonize checking out. We don't have to demonize, you know, the time where we're not doing something.
Right. And I think, I actually think that once you Instagram it, it actually makes it not, a lot of the times, it actually makes it not self-care. We've talked about this before, and like how for me, I've had to change my relationship with social media, because I used to like be somewhere and I'd be Instagramming while I was there, but it took away from the experience of being there. And so now I'm like, okay, I like taking pictures. I love taking videos. I have so many more videos and pictures on my phone that I even like, I post like maybe 1% of what I take. But I found that if I could capture it, because I enjoy to capture it, and then afterwards, once I'm done enjoying the moment, then say, is this something I want to share, or is this something I'd rather just keep for myself? It maintains the sacredness of that moment for yourself.
Absolutely. And being in Colorado with you, I saw that, and I thought that was so I admire that so much about you, because for me, I use social media really just in terms of like my business and things like that. So thinking about capturing a moment is new to me. And I've always thought, how the hell am I going to enjoy this moment, capture it, post it, put words to it, share it, all like those steps, and like still be in the moment. It wasn't happening for me. And so I started to have this like negative relationship with posting, because I'm like, no, it's going to take away from my moment. And seeing you do it in that way, that you just captured it for yourself. And then at the end of the day, when we're no longer in that moment, choosing to say, okay, now I can share it. Like now I can express it if I want to. And I think that helps with not feeling overwhelmed, because before Instagram used to overwhelm the hell out of me in that way. But now seeing this way, that it makes it more manageable.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of people agreeing with that, that method as well. It makes your photos more organic too, when it's not taken for the purpose of Instagram right away. I fucking feel that.
Yeah, and Gina, for sure. Me and posting is a love-hate relationship, girl. Yup.
So another one that we had was, when overwhelm shows up, our systems need a break, which we kind of already talked about. But just doing all of the things and being in this go hustle culture, we sometimes, especially when you're like, I have a very strong mind, I can push my body, I can push myself to do a lot of things. But emotionally, it can be torture to push myself through things, right? And so now I'm in this place where I'm like, okay, you chill the fuck out.
Yeah.
That was like my head and heart yesterday, was like, why can't we do this? Why can't we do this? Can you just work with me? And my body's like, bro, no, we've been going so hard. I need a fucking break.
Like, I'm done. Let us break.
And break.
and you got to answer to that, right? You had to answer. I think that was the same thing for me, and that, that was something that you and I really discovered together, was this concept of the freedom days.
Yeah.
Right. And that has been super helpful for me, because I used to see clients Monday through Friday, all throughout the day. And then by the time even the weekend came, I wasn't even able to enjoy the weekend because I was so burnt out. And so for me, what I chose to do was to take Thursdays as this concept that we've kind of explored as the freedom day. So what I do is I stack my clients on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday I have off. And that break, now I can work so hard on those days that I see my clients, and I'm so in it, and my energy is so there, because I know also on Thursday I'm going to be able to indulge in having a break. So the breaks allow for the recovery. The breaks allow for the powerful energy that you need on those days that you need to be on.
Absolutely.
And so not demonizing, not demonizing that you may need a day off.
Right. I'm just
we
making
all
space, like making space for the ebb and flow. And, Noelle actually has been Instagramming a lot about periods and cycles and period cups as well. But, just bringing in, as a female, bringing in the cycle and the hormones to this discussion, and learning your cycle, and learning that when after you ovulate, you turn inward, you become much more recluse, introspective, your energy levels drop. And also understanding that, like, you guys ever like realize that, like, 1 week out of the month you're on fucking fire, you're super extroverted, you're like go, and then like 2 weeks out of the month you're like, don't talk to me
too much stimulation, too much 100%. That's hormonal, that's our body, that's literally our biological makeup saying that sometimes we can be extroverted and we can be out, and sometimes being introverted, and honoring both, and not fighting it, not saying, well, I'm only an extrovert and I always have to be on. That is not true whatsoever, right?
That's toxic extroversion right there. That is toxic extroversion.
Yes.
It's
100%.
true. It's true though. It's so true. And Naya, we're gonna get to your question because she brought up toxic positivity, which is definitely something I want to touch on this.
For sure.
But I just want to zip through these. So when overwhelm shows up in our lives, we said that we've reached our emotional bandwidth. Our systems need a break. Another one is that our reality does not meet our expectations. And this is a big one, you know, considering all that's happening in the world, you know, from a health perspective, from an economic perspective, from a freedom perspective, there's culturally, socially, there's a lot going on.
So much.
And, you know, a lot of us had this idea of what 2020 was going to be. I mean, I was supposed to be on the road right now. I was supposed to be doing the nomad thing, you know, and I'm grounded down in Colorado. So total cut off of like what I thought my world was going to be, and just dealing with that. So can you speak to that when our expectations aren't meeting our realities?
100%. And that, I think, if anything, this time that we're going through really is showing us that we need to have more maneuverability in our lives, that we need to have, you know, more flexibility with ourselves, that it's healthy and it's great for us to have these goals. Everyone should have goals and things that we're working towards and things that we want to do and dates, you know, that we're scheduled to do these things. But life is showing us that that's not always going to work out. That's not how things work out. That's not how this thing works. That's not how life works. That we're always going to nail it. That we're always going to be able to do the things that we want to do at the time that we want to. And so it's really important to say, okay, these are our goals, meaning this is what we're going to strive for. However, especially if it matters outside of our own hands, if it matters outside of our control, to have that flexibility to say, okay, I wasn't able to go to my Italy vacation this summer of 2020, but can I still strive for that at another time? And do I have to get mad at myself, or do I have to, like, you know, get upset when I don't reach that goal? Mm-hmm. And so bringing in flexibility, bringing in maneuverability, and saying, gosh, what a more enjoyable life it would be if I was able to roll with the waves instead of fighting against the current, right? Just ride it, you know, ride the wave instead of saying, no, I've got to go the other way, mm-hmm. and fighting against the tide, right? Mm-hmm. Allowing yourself to say, okay, it just didn't, you know, it didn't work out. That doesn't mean it's not going to. It just means that at this time, or, you know.
Right, or that something else isn't going to come along and, you know, blow the expectation that I had out of the water, right? And a new opportunity could potentially present, right?
That's a whole nother thing, 100%. That, like, if for whatever reason you're not able to do what you expected, most of us can look back on things that we planned for, or, you know, people we wanted to be with, or friends that we wanted to have in our lives, or all these types of things that we strive for. And a lot of us can look back at a lot of these different situations and say, okay, I know why that ended. Like, yeah. I know why that ended. I know why that person's happened. Right. I know why I'm no longer with that job. I know why I'm no longer in that relationship. I know why I wasn't able to get that house when I wanted to get that house. Now looking back in hindsight, when it happens, we're in high emotion. So when we're not able to achieve that thing or be with that person or have that job, then our emotions are high, and so logic is really not able to be seen. Mm-hmm. That's why that whole concept of, like, hindsight 2020 is, like,
it's so true.
Like, mind-blowing for us, because emotions are low and logic is high. And so we're able to think of things and see things so clearly. So when something doesn't work out and we're upset about it, honor those emotions and say, okay, I'm having a strong emotional reaction to it. But maybe, just maybe, there's an opportunity for us to see things differently. Mm-hmm. That maybe I wasn't meant to stay at this job, or maybe I wasn't meant to stay with that person. And allowing the reason to show itself. But if you keep on
Mhm.
fighting it, the reason why whatever it is that didn't work out may not show up if you're not able to receive it.
Right. And this what you're saying speaks to surrender and trust, and kind of like having that trust in yourself and
Yes.
in your resilience and your I guess adaptability versus needing to control and for things to go exactly how you want them or need them to go in order to feel a
100%.
certain way, right? Because so much is out of our control.
Absolutely.
We think it's not, but it really is.
I can't even imagine, just on right now in this live, how many people had hard days, challenging days that they didn't think, they were going to be able to get through.
Mm.
And they said, this is just a really shitty week and I don't know, I can't see the light. And now where you are now, looking back and saying, I did get through it, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what you have to really do for yourself when you're in these tough situations, recognizing that you had tough situations before, recognizing that you had hardships before and troubling days and challenging times, and that you did get through it. And that we
Mm.
are so resilient. We do adapt. We do know how to overcome challenges. It's just scary as shit in the moment.
Yeah.
It's just terrifying in the moment. And so realizing that the emotions in the moment.
Right, right. And what you said earlier about how when you're in that moment of overwhelm,
Mm-hmm.
it just feels, right? It feels like anxiety, like tightness, like sadness, like heaviness. And then the narratives start coming, the explanations for what these emotions mean. And I
Mm-hmm.
know even yesterday when I was there, it felt like there's this fear of, oh my God, I'm slipping. I'm going back into a negative place. I'm going back into, oh my God, this is going to be me. Like I'm not going to be able to regain my optimism or my productivity or whatever, like there's that loss of, as you said, like that logical perspective, and it just
Yes.
becomes a very emotional one, right? And so I think the tool of looking back and reminding yourself that you've been here, you've had days and weeks and months or maybe years like this before,
Yep.
and that this is life, right? It ebbs and flows.
It ebbs and flows, and to know that if you've gotten out of it before, that's just evidence that
Mm-hmm.
you can get through it again. You can get out again. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you have, again, that low energy day or that bad day or just that day that's just really shitty, to know that you've had them before and that you've also have had good days before and high energy days before, and that
Mm-hmm.
you've gotten out of the dark before. And so to trust your system and give it the credit where it's due, that it has overcome, it has allowed for the ebbs and flows before.
Right. And I also think, I mean, this is gonna get, I don't know, it's
Bring it.
yeah, I think so some philosophies, okay, we can also bring in, we can really widen the scope and say, and learn to have gratitude. And that's not to say toxic positivity. Gratitude and toxic positivity, two fucking different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I can be in emotional and mental discomfort, and I can still say, fuck, this is hard, but I know that I'm learning something, I'm gaining perspective, I'm gonna learn a new skill, I'm developing a characteristic within myself that's gonna allow me to experience a high. Because, we all glorify the highs, but without the lows, there wouldn't be highs. And so I think also zooming out to that level and saying, I need the downs. I need the downs. And so I can be grateful. And as you said, ride the waves, right?
Absolutely. And there was a few comments. So Angie, you mentioned that it's very hard to remember in the moment. And it sure is. And that's why it's very important to have things that can bring you back, right? Have things that can return you back to that place of remembering. So this can, we're gonna talk more about the tools, towards the end, but I'll give you a few right now. Whether it's in your journal, you have a headline or a title that says, you've done this before, right? Even give yourself that physical reminder where you can look at and give yourself that evidence of how you've gotten things before. That's why I love journals, because you can look back and look at those crappy days that you wrote about and be like, oh, like I did go through this. Like I did. And I did get out, because there's a day now after that hard day that I wrote about happy things. So our journals are really good. Find somebody in your support system that you can really trust, that they can remind you that you've gotten through shitty days before and that you have gotten out. So have that person to help you snap back, to that, to bring logic in and to help emotions come down. So having those tools in your toolkit, because in the moment, if you don't have your toolkit with you 100%, it can flood you and it can be extremely hard to remember. And that's why it's very important to have these mental health tools, so when these challenges come up, you know which ones to pull out. Whether it's that friend, whether it's that journal, whether it's your therapist, whether it's whatever it may be that can remind you of how capable you are to get out of these moments.
Amen.
All right.
So a couple more things. When overwhelm shows up, it can show up when there's massive, abrupt change, which is something that we all experienced collectively and to different degrees. And that involves what is our normal, and that is changing, right?
Yes, 100%. 100%. And knowing that our normal is going to change often. It may not be in this huge collective experience all the time, but our normal is, in our personal bubble, shifts and it makes changes. So again, just that adaptability piece is just so handy to remember, that we can adapt to when our norm changes.
Absolutely. So one other thing, last thing, overwhelm shows up when you're feeling scared and incapable, like to handle your current situations, and then also when life is happening to you one thing after another, like that feeling of I can't catch a break.
Yes, and I'm sure a lot of people have been, and I think we talked about this, Nicole, that with you in Colorado, it's a very, very different experience than what I'm personally experiencing here in Florida. Right? We'll talk just, a little bit about COVID and that, how people in Colorado experiencing the coronavirus is very different than how people in Florida is experiencing it right now. And so when I mentioned to you earlier, when we're talking about, what does overwhelm look for us, I'm overwhelmed still with, with COVID. And for you, you're like, wow. And I know that you did experience those feelings of being overwhelmed with COVID before.
Right.
When this, when it first really started getting heavy over here. But Florida is, if anything, kind of feeling the wave of overwhelming again for a lot of people, not everyone. So I don't want to go ahead and say all of Florida. But me personally, being in Florida, it's still very overwhelming. So even just knowing that, talking to your friends and talking to your family, even though it's still a very collective experience, that the states are still very much experiencing something collectively, our realities, just talking about me and you, our realities are very, very different right now. Our concerns are very, very different right now, with even a collective experience.
Right. It's true. It's a spectrum. It is a spectrum. And I was looking through the people who applied for or entered for the giveaway for Jump. And there were a few people that were like, I've been on the front lines of COVID since the beginning. And it's like, whoa, remember when we were all supporting our frontline workers and everything, and then the whole Black Lives Matter thing happened, and it kind of things shifted, right? And now everyone's just trying to find some semblance of normalcy and deal with feelings of apathy, which is another live I think we should do, definitely, to talk about feelings of apathy. But but yeah, there's also people that are still there, dealing on the front lines with COVID. So yeah.
100%. So it's very important to continue to honor people if they're still overwhelmed by something that you've moved to a different place about. If you yourself are not overwhelmed about COVID, for example, and your friend or your family member is, tune in to when you were overwhelmed.
Right.
Hold on to those feelings. It's very important to not forget experiences. So reach back and say, okay, I remember when I was overwhelmed, and if that person is still there, then holy shit. Okay, how can I be there for that person that's still overwhelmed? And to not approach it with judgment, or not to approach it with this place of, well, how could they still be there? I mean,
Right.
however many days later, right? To know that everyone's experiencing it different.
Absolutely. And we have Flourishful says she's still there, and Nicole, I know you're still on the front line, so thank you
Still
guys.
working so hard.
You guys.
100%.
Okay, so one of the things, and thank you guys to everyone who wrote in questions for us to answer, but one of the things that I kept seeing in the questions was this feeling paralyzed, right? Just totally being paralyzed. So I would love, Claudia, for you to speak to what that actually is, like what's happening within the body and how we can move forward when we're feeling just stuck like Chuck.
Yep. So feeling overwhelmed is definitely an extension of anxiety. So we've talked about anxiety before, but just a little bit of a reminder of it is that when we are feeling anxiety, it's when the fight, flight, or freeze response has been activated. So in this place of feeling overwhelmed and feeling paralyzed, we're in freeze. We're in freeze. We're not in fight. We're not in flight. We're in this place that we're feeling stuck. And that can be an anxiety response too. And that's why, we've talked about a little bit how anxiety can disguise itself into depression. And depression can be that feeling of paralyzed and frozen and just wanting to stay in the bed and just wanting to not move or not do anything. And so that's how anxiety sneaks in and disguises itself as depression, because it can be the response of freeze, frozen, paralyzed, stuck. And so that's another important indicator for you that something isn't aligned. So when you're having that response of, I just can't do shit today, I'm so exhausted, I'm feeling paralyzed, then give yourself some time. Give yourself some time to see if you can, if your body will just naturally be able to adapt. And, even just giving yourself the day off and saying, okay, I'm taking a mental health day. Let me just stay in bed. Let me just, decompress. See if that helps. And if not, that's when it's important to pull out the toolkit, right? Is it that friend? Is it that journal? Is it that therapist? Is it meditation? Is it, breath work? Is it going to lift weights? Whatever it may be. And that's when you have to really get to know yourself and say, okay, what do I do when I fight? What do I do when I flight? What do I do when I freeze? And give yourselves a different understanding for what that looks like for you.
So when you said it's an anxiety response, right? And anxiety is fear about the future. We can say that, right?
Yep.
Okay. So
it's the fear, it's the worry, it's the concern of the future for sure.
Okay, so if I'm feeling stuck, even though it feels like I have no energy and I'm depressed, because it's like this overwhelm that's weighing on me, it's dark, I'm tired, I'm lethargic, it's actually me, that's the manifestation, but it's actually me anxious about the future and what can I control, what am I going to make the right decision?
Absolutely.
All of those what ifs.
Yeah, because if we think anxiety is worrying about the future, then we can kind of then say that depression is worrying about the past, right? So if you're overwhelmed because of future things, that it's just so much for you to like digest and manage, and then you go into a physiological response of feeling paralyzed, then that's when anxiety can sneak in and disguise itself as looking depressed.
Okay. I just wanted to like make that because
it's complex. Complex.
But once you realize that, it helps you get perspective. And actually, once you do take the time to like give yourself space, it gives you perspective on when I'm ready to get back in, the first thing I need to do is go into my toolbox and work towards solving these things that I'm anxious about with the future, whether that's making a to-do list and tackling it, or whether that's actively writing it down and surrendering it, right? Like that's a spectrum too, but just understanding that overwhelm, that paralyzed feeling, is actually fear of the future, I think is going to help a lot of people move forward from it once they give themselves space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To know that if you can sit with it and sit with whatever is overwhelming with you, and that's what's so important, right? Is that you have to look at these things. You have to come face to face with whatever it is that's causing you these emotions, these fight, these flight, these freeze responses. That you have to come face to face with it, because that's coming face to face with you. And if you can't look at you and talk to you and say what's really going on, then that's when the problem becomes bigger. That's when the problem becomes exacerbated. And that's when the emotions get so riled up because they're being ignored. So it's coming face to face with it, as ugly as it is, and facing those hard truths, right? Those hard truths, and saying, oof, I either got to get rid of some things, I got to rearrange some things I may not want to. I may have thought that I could handle, or not handle, but I may have thought that they were good for me or serving me well.
Right.
And
or they
so,
did serve you well.
Or they did, and maybe
Right.
no longer. And so
Right.
having those hard truths and saying, okay, what do I got to do?
Right. So really quickly, before we go on with the list, Rhea Rivers just asked a question that like piqued my interest, because it is something that I've been toying with since I started my personal discovery journey, and just on this path of increased awareness. Do you think that more anxiety can be caused by doing shadow work? So for those of you guys who don't know, shadow work is the work of bringing what is subconscious to light. The qualities, the characteristics, the patterns, the thoughts, the truths that are part of you that you deny, or shame, or just aren't aware of, right? And so the process of bringing all those things to light, I think, Ria, I think that, first of all, yes, I think that once you start increasing awareness and you become aware of all of your patterns and you're just like living a more conscious life, you start thinking, you're not only thinking, you're thinking about what you're thinking about. And then you're thinking about how you're thinking about what you're thinking about. It's like, and then you start getting in that you get stuck, because you're like, am I thinking about this right? Wait, am I thinking about the way I'm thinking about this right? And then you just, right? And so it just becomes this like crazy thing. But I think that once you start integrating, I think integrating is the missing piece that maybe you're missing, or I'm curious if you're working on not just discovering, but also accepting the darkness along with the light, right? And I have a friend that always says to me, because whenever I find something in my shadow, I always try to change it immediately. And he's like, some things are not things to change. Some things are just things to accept. And that has helped me tremendously in my personal discovery journey as it relates to anxiety.
100%. 100%. When you're doing things like shadow work, I'll speak a little bit about the JUMP program. I think that's why it's so beautifully laid out, is because so in the JUMP program, shadow work is one of the things that we start to dabble in. And I love it because it's not in the first few days. Because it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be something that you just dive right into. Shadow work needs to be something that you do when you have the tools in your toolbox, when you know how to cope with things, when you know how to emotionally regulate, when you know how to manage when triggers get activated. And so even with trauma work, when I do trauma work, or any of my clinicians do trauma work, we don't do it in the first session. We don't do it in the second. We may not even do it in the third. And that's because we as therapists have to gauge if we feel like you're safe enough to be able to look in the past and be able to do that trauma work. And so it's really important that, you know, we gauge, do you know how to cope and cope in a way that's going to serve you well? Do you have, you know, the support system in your life? Do you have the skills that you need to have before you go and dive into this work? So if you're feeling extremely overwhelmed, or if anxiety is coming up because you're having and doing this shadow work, then that may be an indicator that you may need to pause it, take a step back, and look at what you have in place to be able to support you during your shadow work. Whether it's, again, a friend, a trusted confidant, a therapist, if you have tools to help you when those very uncomfortable feelings can come up while you're learning yourself, you know, it can be very, very powerful work, and it's so transformative. But it needs to be handled with care.
Absolutely, absolutely. I just found that shadow work helped me become, I don't know, it like put the overly naive girl with rose-colored glasses, who was beautiful, and that served me for a while, but it kind of put her to bed in a way, and I can still access her, but like I can look at the world in a more like realistic way.
Yeah.
Because I look at myself in a more realistic way, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, so that was feeling paralyzed, and you mentioned coping. So I want to talk about if there is a distinction, because I kind of see a distinction between coping versus dealing. I see dealing with something as like, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to get constructive. I'm going to get active, versus coping to me. And maybe this is because of my relationship to addicts and just addiction in general. It runs in my family. But when I hear coping, I think like you're numbing out, or like I'm coping. I'm just like doing the bare bones versus like actually dealing. Is there a distinction?
So I think that, right, if you grew up in that kind of environment, because 100%, I think with, you know, with work that comes from addiction and recovering, the language of coping is really associated with that you have, you know, that negative coping skill by using alcohol to numb out.
Exactly.
But just like there's negative coping skills, there's also positive coping skills. And I would say the positive coping skills are the journaling, the meditating, you know, the going to take a walk, the working out. And so coping it can be interchangeable with dealing. It can be interchangeable with managing. It can be interchangeable with, you know, emotionally regulating. So coping is just like, how you cope is how you deal, is how you get through whatever challenge it is. But 100%, if you grew up in a family or with somebody, a caretaker, a loved one, then you're most likely going to hear it associated in that way. But coping is just how we freaking get through things.
Right. Okay. No, and I like that. I like that coping is a spectrum.
Yeah, 100%. Coping is all these tools. Coping's how we manage.
Right. And we could say that there are things that we use to cope that people can label bad, especially if addiction is something that runs in the family and they're hyper aware of. Like, you know, having a glass of wine at night or smoking weed or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But it's also a question of moderation, right? It's also, you know, and knowing, and I get, for me, like just being aware, and we talked about this in Colorado, like being aware and like asking myself, like, why am I going for this wine right now? Okay, I'm using it to take the edge off. Is there something else I could do to take the edge off so that I don't continue to ingrain this pattern of, in order to feel relaxed, I need to have a glass of wine, right? Like this isn't the only tool in my toolbox.
Absolutely. If you're reaching for a glass of wine, then being able to distinguish, this is the only way I'm going to get relaxed, I think is a great indicator of the relationship that you have with alcohol. If alcohol is your only source of being able to come down from a hard day of work, then I think that it may be important to expand to form other relationships with other things. Because if alcohol is your only relationship for even celebrating, even for good things, then I think that's also really important to acknowledge that then that can get skewed to become unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
Just as much as like if your partner is the only relationship you go to for any and all the things, right? That healthy relationship can then become unhealthy. Absolutely. If you put that much weight on it. So any relationship with anything that's relied on too much, I would say can get unhealthy.
Absolutely. Good points. Okay, so now let's dive into these tips and tools to get active. The first, so this is like, okay, I'm overwhelmed. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Here are things you can do in that moment, right? So the first thing that we have is a perspective shift.
Oh, yeah.
Switching up the way that we're looking at whatever it is that we're dealing with.
100%. I think it was really, really cool. I had a session with a client the other day, and she had picked up a temporary job. She had gotten laid off for COVID, and she picked up a temporary job, and it was not a fit for her and her personality and just you know, the job that she wants to be doing. And so she could have looked at that job as shitty, as a bad experience, as, you know, a waste of her time, as, you know, all of those things. But actually how she was able to look at it is, I learned a lot from it, because it wasn't something that I would normally do, because that's something that I wouldn't normally align myself with. That's not the normal job that I would have. Mm-hmm. But she was able to grab what she, you know, could out of it. There was takeaways from it. And so she learned about all the things that she would have normally never have been exposed to. And now she can carry on. She's like, okay, I learned my lesson from that, and I can move forward and do, you know, with this new knowledge. So that's perspective right there. Glass half full, glass half empty. I know it's super cliche, but if that shit is real though.
Yeah, I just thought about, it is all about perspective, and it is looking at the glass half full. But I just thought about Neo's question about how, because essentially that's gratitude, right? Essentially that's saying, I'm grateful for this experience. It didn't work out, absolutely, but it's still an economic repression. There's a global pandemic, mm-hmm. and this job isn't working out. Like, what am I going to do? There's still like room for, I think the key here is like, we can have gratitude for something and the situation, and then also still leave room for the feelings that are there, right? The emotions that are there.
Absolutely. We know we don't have to, you know, again, if we get a temporary job, we don't have to say, oh my gosh, I have to only be grateful. You can be grateful and say, but I'm also not really comfortable with this, or I really don't like this. You know, you can have the duality and you know, having the both and perspective. It's super mm-hmm. important to not say I have to be at one extreme or the other. I have to be super grateful right now and that's it. Or I have to be miserable right now and that's it. It can be both. It's important to allow all the emotions to be honored. And they may come in different days. Today I may be grateful to me. Tomorrow I could be like, meh.
Fucking hate this shit.
Right.
Tis true. Okay, so this is for someone who's not moving. This is for someone who's stuck and kind of running away from realities. The most important thing is to sit with the hard truths. To actually like recognize where you are, what the current circumstances of your life are, and to sit with the truths that, you know, if you gave space to yourself, they would surface, right? Or if you started digging, they would come forth. Because you can't change your circumstances if you don't know what you're working with in the present, right? What your realities are. And hard truths was a theme of the work retreat that we went on. Was it last week, 2 weeks ago?
think it was,
There were so many hard truths that came up.
we were
And
rolling
the
in.
reason, yeah, we were rolling. Grace, go stay with the hard truth. What's up, Grace? I didn't even know you were on the
I
show.
know, she was like popped in. Of course, she would pop in at that time. I love it. I love it. Yes.
But I think if you're kind of stuck and you're stuck in like the same mundane patterns of your life, I would say the reason why so many hard truths came to the forefront was because we were in an environment that was different from our natural environment. We were with people that we felt safe with. And we were having open, vulnerable, honest conversations with one another. And so I'm not saying, go rent a house in the mountains for a week, but if you can take a day with your best friend and go to the beach or the lake or whatever, sit by the water or in nature, I highly recommend nature, and just level with one another and level with yourself and speaking those things, those truths into existence. They take it out of like this, here's this huge problem, and then you externalize it, and then you can look at it like a Rubik's Cube, as opposed to a one-dimensional problem. You can say, okay, here's the problem, here's the truth, now here's the potential to start moving, right?
Yes, 100%, 100%. If you're trying to, escape reality and you feel stuck and you just, then 100% looking at those hard truths and getting, real. And I think it was Angie. So sometimes the truth becomes overwhelming. Learning to cope with that is hard as well. And that's myself, Nicole, and Grace were fortunate enough to have each other. But if you can even have just one person that you can call and be able to say like, holy shit, I think I'm stumbling upon this awareness, or I think this has to change and that's really scary for me because that's my hard truth, then I think just talking it out loud helps. It really, really helps. If you don't have anybody that you feel safe enough to be able to talk about those hard truths, talk to yourself. And that's why, journaling is tried and true, because it's you talking to you. It's you on that paper. So being able to like get on there and say your hard truths and talk it out and get so curious of, why is this scaring me? Why is this frightening me? What is so overwhelming about this? What am I holding on to? Right? And being able to really get curious and be gentle with yourself and just look at it through that lens. And think about it like this. I always say this: if your best friend just came to you with this hard truth, how would you treat them? How would you be, abrupt with them? Would you be aggressive with them about their hard truth, or would you be able to be gentle with them? And if you were able to be gentle with somebody else, then give yourself the same kind of kindness.
Absolutely. Grace also just said, I think it's important to find people also on the growth journey so they don't project their lack of truth onto you. And I think that's absolutely true. Like one of the key components to a relationship for me is you have to be on a self-awareness journey. You have to be on a personal growth journey. We don't have to be at the same place.
Yeah.
But dude, like if you're not doing the work, I can't talk to you about the work because you're not aware of when you're projecting. You're not aware of your own limiting beliefs, right?
Yes.
And then because you're not aware of them, I can't call you on them. And that's one of the beautiful things about our relationship. You're like, oh wow, that's a pattern for you, and you call me on shit that allows me to recognize where I'm falling short and maybe I'm stuck and overwhelmed, right? And having people like that to is
and so if you want that for yourself, like if you want people like that, then be curious about that when you meet people, right? Ask them those questions, get curious and don't let it be just so abnormal to talk about growth when you're meeting somebody. See where they're at with it. What is their experience with it?
So true. So true. Right. Like instead of talking about like, what do you do for a living? Where'd you go to school? Where do you like to travel? It's like, what's the last book you read? Like, what's the last seminar you went to? Like, who are your top favorite, who are the top 3 people that you follow on Instagram, or like who you look up
Yes.
to. Things like that allow you to get deeper into the psyche of a person and the values and priorities of a person versus
Mm.
where do you go to school, how much money do you make, where do you live, where do you like to travel, like,
Right.
oh,
Right. Because
you know.
it's 2020. We're getting real. We are getting real now. We are getting, into these uncomfortable conversations, and let's make uncomfortable conversations the new norm, right? Get into the weeds with people, like, talk about these things and really learn who you're dealing with and who's in your life and who's in, who you're exchanging energy with, and those types of things.
I actually really like that the new norm. That's kind of a cool product of all of these shifts that have been happening in the world lately, is that
Mhm.
part of the new norm is that people are having to have difficult conversations. It's actually pretty beautiful.
Absolutely.
So Raven Willow Sage asked, how do you cope with the fact that no matter how much you get done, you never feel like you've done enough? So for me, what comes up when I hear this question is perhaps you have an unrealistic expectation for yourself, Raven. Your idea of what productive and successful looks like is not realistic for you. And maybe that's in general, or maybe that's just with everything going on in the world. I think a tool to be able to like level with yourself and find out what your actual productivity is to time block your days. And for me, I'm like that too. And I'm like a say yes to everything, and then half of it falls through, and I'm actually really productive, but compared to what I think I can do, I'm unproductive, right? And so I there's like this weird disparity that leaves me feeling like I'm never doing enough. I don't know if that resonates with you, Raven, but time blocking really helped me see, okay, I actually need 30 minutes between hour-long phone calls. I actually need decompression time, and I need to time block that in. It actually takes me 4 hours to film 4 workout videos, even though I projected it would only take 2. And so time blocking your days, having a day, and then at night sitting with your calendar and saying, I went over all of these time blocks, so tomorrow I'm going to adjust accordingly so that I have a better relationship with time management, right? I also think that it could be a lack of boundaries, and saying yes to a million things and not being able to kind of take that time for yourself. But yeah, and I just asking yourself, like, is this lifestyle sustainable and one that you want to perpetuate if you're never feeling good about what you're producing?
Absolutely.
Do you
Absolutely.
have anything out of that?
No, I think that, you really covered it, but I think it's, just, let's just add in, like, just allowing yourself to be human, especially if you're in this place where if this is maybe perhaps like a new job or a new thing that you're trying and you didn't nail it on the first day, 2 week, know that you're learning, know that we're human, and to bring in that place of, why do I always feel like I have to have it perfect? And that, that can kind of bridge into perfectionism. And do you only settle, are you only happy when you get it perfect? Can you celebrate the small wins that maybe you didn't get 100% of your to-do list done, but hell, can you give yourself credit if you're at 60%? Can you be proud of the 60 and say, okay, the other 40 I'll have to adjust and bring to another day?
Yeah.
Or because then if you don't get 100 done and say you got 60, does 60 then become shit and
Right.
and dismissed and not acknowledged, not given credit for?
That's
So, bringing in that maneuverability and say, okay, I'm going to be proud of what I did do, and take the things that I didn't do and just readjust and just know that, shoot for attainable goals. We've talked about this before, just making small changes will boost your confidence more so than giving yourself a whole crazy to-do list and saying, okay, I'm going to get, the videos done, at this amount of time. If you know that's really challenging, then maybe give yourself like a bigger window and surprise yourself, if anything. Right? Give yourself an opportunity to be proud of yourself more than setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said small wins, and starting small is what you said.
Yeah.
And I made a post about it and was talking about how I kind of fell off after our retreat, and like all of the positive love and just like quality time that I was getting when I got home. I was just like lonely and craving that connection. And instead of taking the time to connect with myself, I was just like in that feeling of like overwhelm and anxious lethargy. And I listened to a lecture by Jordan Peterson, who's a psychologist and a professor. And he was in the video, he's speaking to someone who's like at a starting point, like just total despair, depression, doing none of the things that they know they should be doing. Mm-hmm. But all of the things we know we should be doing overwhelm us, right? Mm-hmm. And so he says, if you're in a place where you're eating ice cream every day and you're not working out and you're doing all of the not things, right? Mm-hmm. He says, start small and just get out of bed and put the dishes in the dishwasher and then reward yourself by having the ice cream. And so like you kind of, instead of working against where you are, you work with where you are and you leverage the things that you're using to kind of cope and check out as a way to actually improve, and literally like, you asked that question last jump. You were like, where are you guys at percentage wise? 30%. Okay. Tomorrow, what would 31% look like? What would 31% look like? And that for me, yes. It makes climbing out of holes easier because you're like, I don't need to do it all. I don't need to fucking do it all. I can get out of bed, do my morning routine. And if I didn't do my morning routine for 2 weeks straight, that was a win. Like that was a win for me. And I can take off at 3:00 and go put on girly clothes and walk around because that's what my mental health needs, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think and I'm so glad that resonated with you because, not even putting the pressure on yourself to say, I've got to get at 40 because like, let's think about it, right? If we're at 30, to jump a whole damn 10%, like that's a lot to think of what 10% is then, right? So just saying 31, like that makes it so much more manageable in your mind. Don't give yourself more than you can like bear or have the bandwidth for. 31, you can. 31, you can.
Totally can.
But 40, that's still like,
yeah,
that's a lot.
Like, what does it even look like? Like 1% more is, I didn't have the extra cup of coffee at 5 p.m. or, right. I had a salad. Like that's it. It's just like one thing, and it's so much more manageable. And the truth is that if you do 1% extra every week, in a few weeks you're looking at that. Well, in 10 weeks you're looking at that. Yeah. And I think the beauty about doing 1% is that the momentum starts to build, and then you may notice that you can jump 5% or you can jump that 10% in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. And even you can even say like on your high energy days, maybe you may climb 3 to 5%. And your low energy days, it's like, let me just do like 0.5% today, mm-hmm. right? But like meeting yourself where you're at, taking advantage of the high energy days. And when you're feeling good, and we can even talk, looping that back to like, for the women, like your cycle, like when you're at your peak, when you're at your high energy days, go like do all the things while you're on fire. So that way, when you're on your low energy days, you can be okay with 0.5% or 1%. And so having that fluctuation and that maneuverability in your life and in your cycle and in your day-to-day will make the climb that much, much more attainable.
Yeah. And I also think like realizing like what's individual to you, meaning like your specific needs, things that actually work for you. Because I think sometimes we have standards of productivity and success and thriving that are actually based on different types of people, right? People that are more type A, or people that are much more organized and orderly, whereas like you may be super creative and free spirited. And so you try to like really, really, and not to say that that's not a skill and a tool you can't acquire, but to also pay attention when you're trying to create these levels of productivity and get out of overwhelm. Also pay attention to the way that you feel when you're implementing the tools.
Absolutely. 100% honoring those things.
So, okay, so we talked about journaling. We talked about gratitude, making okay, so I just want to close with this because I know that we're really pushing time here. But for me, getting out of overwhelm is less so much about doing and tackling the things as it is raising my vibrations and giving myself space. So if I'm feeling overwhelmed, the problem is not how can I think, usually it's not how can I think about this problem differently. It's like actively like force myself to, it's let me take a step back, give myself space and pause and self-care and raise my vibrations. And what does raising my vibrations look like? It's crying if I need to cry. It's watching a funny movie and laughing if that's what my system calls for. It's calling a friend. It's really leveling with myself and saying, this is what I feel. These are the toxic, or I don't want to say toxic, but this is like the narrative that's pulling me down. Let me externalize it and actually look at it and say, this is bullshit, right? Like, I'm scared of failing because it's going to mean that I'm unworthy and a piece of shit. Let me write that down, because if I actually look at it and rationalize with it, I can detach, right? Disassociate from it and start to form a new narrative around it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rewriting that narrative. That's so powerful to be able to like look at what you've been telling yourself and say, is this true or is this just what I'm feeling?
Absolutely. it's a script about what you're feeling, right? But yeah, that's just what I want to close on. So like figuring out, just back to, figuring out what works for you, pouring into yourself in order to deal with overwhelm and all of the things that are overwhelming you, your circumstances of your life. A problem can't be solved with the same mindset that it was created, or that you were in when it was created. And so I think focusing on raising our vibrations, and I don't want that to come across as toxic positivity, because it doesn't always fucking feel positive to like, meaning like happy-go-lucky and like good vibes only, and like I want to spread positive vibes. Like sometimes raising your vibrations is literally allowing yourself to sit in the emotional gunk.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. And allow those very uncomfortable emotions that bring you to feeling overwhelmed. Let them simmer, let them come down, and that's gonna be it, right? Bringing that level down to simmer instead of on high. And how can you do that? How can you emotionally regulate? How can you get yourself to a place where you're not up here, but you're getting more grounded?
Yeah. And they're all like, get salty.
Get salty.
Yes, we're definitely gonna save this live. I'll post it on my not story, my grid.
Yep.
I'll post it on my grid. All right, you guys. I just want to remind you guys that tomorrow is the last day. Actually, Saturday is the last day to sign up for Jump. 28 days of self-love, connection, self-exploration, moving every day, eating plant-based meals, journaling, learning. Dr. Claudia is going to be leading weekly mental health check-ins. So we would love for you guys to join us. And if you guys have any questions, you can DM us.
So excited. I really hope that you guys are able to join us for this jump season, because again, now more than ever, we need, like, okay, these kinds of talks right here that you're witnessing, like we have those 4 times throughout this program with this group and having like those mental health check-ins. And I'm so excited to bring them back because, my gosh, not only can I use them, but I'm sure like the community can use them right now.
Absolutely. And the cool thing is, in the mental health check-ins that we do them on Zoom. So you'll also get to share in the same way. And there's a lot of space for you to work through the things that are coming up as
Absolutely. Just like Myra said, we get deep. We get deep. And we're all there for each other to support each other.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Claudia.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for being here.
See you guys.
Love you guys.